Hello, friends. It's the end of Act 3. Thanks for joining us as we put a bow on the first half of our story and the last 3 years of the show. As I'm sure you're expecting if you've listened to us this far, the bulk of today's episode is, of course, going to be devoted to the recovered life stories of our characters. It's a piece of scripted storytelling that my 4 dear friends read completely cold, with no prep, as this was being recorded. But of course, we do pick back up in scene for the last chunk of the episode with what happens upon our heroes awakening from the Oasis. With all the stuff that comes out in the 3 parts of Chapter 150, I hope you can find the time over the next few weeks to pop back to the beginning of the show and give at least the prologue, if not the first chapter, a re-listen. There are so many things that we circle back to or recontextualize here. If it's been a while for you, you might enjoy being reminded of the things that we have been referring back to these past few episodes. And here's the plan for the next few weeks. Monday, September 15th, we'll release the conversation that the 5 of us had about Act 3 right after we finished recording what you're about to hear. Plus, I've got a bonus thing to share on top of that. The following week, September 22nd, we'll have another Q&A episode with listener questions. There is still time to send those in. info@darknexuspodcast.com or on the socials. After that, September 29th, we'll have another recap and review to get you refreshed before the new season starts. And then Act 4 kicks off on October 6th. As always, thank you to our supporters on Patreon, and welcome to Tim and Tony. You can find links to our Patreon page and the merch store at darknexuspodcast.com. All right, here we go. Welcome back to Dark Nexus. Tonight, it's Act 3, Chapter 150, Part 3. All right, we faced the Mad Poet, and we got what we desired. Or at least we got what we said we desired before we began the long trek to the Oasis. Barnabas got his release from the inmost blot, but at the cost of his memories and experience. Vic secured his daughter's safety, but at the cost of never seeing her again. And as for what the rest of you said you desired, get your memories back, understand your situation more fully, find wholeness again, learn how to find Neruzevin, you now know what Lowles learned when he was last here. The location of Neruzevin is to be found within the dread pages of the Necronomicon. And after doing battle with some twisted dark mirrors of yourselves, you've secured your bodies and recovered your memories. What were those things that you fought? They weren't exactly dream bodies, because who could have been dreaming them? They weren't exactly you from when you were last at the Oasis, because you saw those versions of yourselves. Those hollowed out people weren't those people you just fought. Perhaps they were just like metaphysical screen grabs of yourselves from some moment in your life's experience, animated by the Mad Poet's mad whim. They did seem confused, perhaps not quite whole, a little two-dimensional maybe, but were they alive? Were they life? Did you kill them, you? Or were they, you, already dead? And what exactly does it mean for either one of you to, air quotes, get the body, if whoever wakes with both people's memories? If Rip Tusk were to wake remembering both his life and remembering and feeling Grip's life experience, wouldn't he just be Grip? Or take that question in the inverse. As Grip wakes remembering and feeling Rip Tusk's life experience, will he be Rip Tusk? Or would the resulting person, no matter who won that fight, always be some new third person? Or does the fact that you had this absolute utter split in your timeline, where you started over with a blank slate, does that mean that that person, that old version of you, is and was and will always be forever gone? Did you all actually die in that pool that day? Did you actually die in that pool? Did you die? In Act 1, we asked ourselves what it meant to build an identity when you have no memory. Who are you when you don't know what you've done? In the process, we discovered some things that were core to your characters based on the actions that you took in a very closed environment with almost no context to shape you. And coming up in Act 4, we're going to be asking Dora, Grip, and Vic what it means to build an identity out of two separate sets of life experiences. And given that you've experienced this split, will the actions of your past selves forever remain a narrative written by someone else, not to get too meta here, or will ownership of those choices and experience sink in and take root? I have no idea. We're going to have to find out. All right, here we go, pals. Our last story time with Uncle Buttons. Actually, today's story time with the whole Buttons family. We're going to do this one together. But yeah, we are here. This is it. This is the last of what I ever created for your characters' backstories. It's my swan song as the long stories from the past guy. After this point, your lives, I pass on to you. Maybe you will fill in the gaps. Maybe you'll poke at points of confusion, or maybe you won't. I do not know. But after this, all four characters will finally be in the same boat in a way they have not been since Ray died. You will all know who you were, in addition to who you are. So my friends, thank you for indulging me in this experiment of doing the campaign this way. It's been a really interesting, creative challenge to put all of this together with your help, and you don't even know yet how much.
6 years?
For the past 6 years. Yeah, I opened up, I don't think I've said this on air. I created 2 documents in 2019. One was a Word doc, and I called it The Tale. And that's literally what we're about to read. And that was just story ideas. I would just open up and I'm like, okay, Robert's character is probably from a different continent. Johnny's character killed somebody, maybe this Dr. Trice, I don't know. Like I would just jot down little stuff like that, and then it would get, as we went on and on and on, I would flesh that stuff out, and then as you all would say things at the table, especially in book 1, I would just like write that in there and then see like where I can put that. And the other document was a spreadsheet of just dates. Because I had to keep for myself, like the whole timing of Wherein interacting with your lives, I more understood kind of loosely in my head until we got to the middle of Act 2. I was like, I actually gotta know what this timeline is. So that's where I start filling all this stuff out. And now I'll be able to close one of these documents forever after this. And here we go. It's not where the story begins, or even really where our story begins, but their stories began
49 years ago.
31 years ago.
28 years ago.
22 years ago.
with the birth of
Dora Kranich.
Victor Zolotov.
The wretched little runt.
Braden Vaticus.
We will never know the life they might have had. We will never know the person they might have been in a different world, in a different timeline, because what might have been their life was stolen from them. Before they were even born, Gavroni Stoicha, Nicholas Morea, and Mej One-Eye, the Serpent, the Baron, and the Conqueror, they made the choice to not just interfere with Wherein, but to torture and murder her, driving her to a revenge scheme that would last decades. And because a deeply petty and vindictive little shit, consumed with seething rage because the world refused to acknowledge his superiority, because this petty, vindictive little shit saw these four as useful tools in his scheme to make himself the most consequential person that ever lived. Dora was born on the 31st of Chthona, the last day of the year of 4669. Her mother was Thessica Antea, though she took her husband Tom Cranach's name. The Cranachs lived simple lives as herders and gatherers in the Numerian plains near the Black Pipe until the Baron rose. In a raid by the Baron's men, Tom was murdered and Thessica was captured. Thessica lived the rest of her life imprisoned in the Baron's castle, and it was there that she gave birth to Dora, born in captivity, the daughter of Nicholas Maria, a.k.a. Baron Feshka Nellet.
Dora was a curious child, gentle and thoughtful. She loved, more than anything, to read.
And she was exploding with psychic potential. This was not entirely uncommon among the children born near the Black Pipe in those days.
Every day she tried little things, and every once in a while, something would happen. A coin would move. A breeze would rustle. Energies would shift.
Victor was born on the first day of Erastus, or July, in 4687, the youngest of 8 children raised and loved by Katerina Stoicha and Edward Zolotov. Katerina declined to participate in the family business her Scarny brother had built up, but Gavroni never held that against his baby sister, and they lived in loving relationship, despite Katerina marrying outside the clan a simple Varisian herbalist and hedge surgeon. Victor was born on the road in the Varisian tradition, and his family traveled the Lost Coast Road.
Victor was always on the move, never standing still. He loved puzzles, logic problems, games, especially hide and seek.
And just as he was trained openly by his father in the ways of healing, he was also trained subtly by his uncle with the skills that he'd need to take over his empire should the need arise.
Little puzzles. How would you unlock this box if you needed to? Little games. How would you sneak up on me from that angle?
The wretched Runt was born in the spring of 4690, 2 years after his brother Fargrid. They were the sons of Mej Both Eyes and grandsons to Mej One Eye, the Conqueror. The Runt's small size at birth and traces of a faint human bloodline that surfaced in him cemented the long-standing rumors about the Conqueror's parentage, or perhaps his inclinations. The Runt's childhood was brutal, but marked by the fierce love Fargrid showed his little brother. Fargrid was his protector. He was his champion. He gave him the name Grook and taught him to take the ironic nickname the others gave him, Riptusk, and own it as a badge of pride as their tribe traveled the punishing wastes of the Assyrian Katapesh border region.
The Runt was reckless and aggressive. He had to be, since he was so much smaller than everyone else.
And because of the danger of his situation, nearly from birth he had to learn to adapt, to strike hard, to change tactics, to keep the other kids who were always trying to hurt him off balance.
And, most important of all, he learned how to take a punch and keep going.
Braden was born in Rosenport to Tima Antea on the 20th of Abadius, 4696. He was born on the night of the new moon, coinciding with the Chthonian holiday of Eternal Kiss, which Braden later saw as a portent. He was Gulliver Vaticus' son, or at least that was the story. Nobody was happy in their home. Mummy hated Ray, Mummy hated Daddy, Daddy hated Mummy, and Reynard hated Daddy, and Daddy hated Reynard, and Mummy had needs, and those needs were all that mattered in the hate-filled house where Braden, eventually Ray, grew up.
Ray was a sensitive soul. He needed so much love, and it wasn't until his sister was born that he finally found it.
He was born marked, twisted in body, but with a soul like a blazing beacon crying out to the divine.
Praying was not his habit by nature or nurture, but when he would whisper a little silly, basically secular prayer to say Desna for a spot of luck, or Caden Kylian for a bit of bravery, more often than not he found that something would happen, or seemed to.
Dora never remembered much of her earliest years, aside from a general sense of terrible darkness and depravity during her years in the Baron's castle.
She never forgot the day she was branded with her father's mark, though. Marked like cattle. He did it himself. He pressed the red-hot iron into his child's neck while she screamed and cried. It was a pain she never forgot.
Victor's earliest years were idyllic for a time. A life on the road with a family that loved him. So many siblings, aunts and uncles, cousins, and all of them loved little Vic, especially Uncle G, who found every opportunity to visit.
On the road, everyone had a job, and his was to care for the pets, the dogs and cats and ferrets and parrots that their little clan kept around to make life richer and brighter.
But when the Red Death came, everything changed. It started with the leaking sores, and no one was spared, no one but Vic, and, hopefully, his eldest brother, Spastionis. But Spastionis wasn't around, so no one knew for sure.
In the darkest days of the plague year, little Vic would lie in bed with the covers over his head and pretend he was in a coffin, trying to feel what his family was going through. He would imagine himself lying there in the earth with his loved ones, missing and loving them all.
His memories of the plague months always remained swimmy, but he never forgot the last time he saw Uncle G. The sores were already showing. He whispered in Victor's ear, "Search under the family tree, little man. I'll put it there. It's yours if you want it." Victor didn't know what he was talking about, but he never forgot the instruction. Once they were all dead, it was straight to an orphanage, Bergen-Belling's home for wayward boys. Grook's childhood was rough, especially after his father, Both Eyes, killed the Conqueror and had all of One Eyes' technological relics purged in a return to the old ways. It was a life of struggle defined by violence and wrapped in the worship of a demon.
Grook's memories of that period of time are always thin. But one thing that stuck was the game he and Thargrid played, where they took turns slapping each other in the face, each time hitting harder and harder, and both of them laughing and laughing as they did it.
Braden's early childhood mostly consisted of trying to stay out of everyone's way and to avoid getting screamed at by his mother. His father spent time with him, but most of that time was spent complaining about his mother. Everything changed, though, or at least it felt like it changed once Daria was born. First of all, Mummy calmed down a bit.
And finally, Ray had someone who loved him completely. And Ray made it his life's mission to protect his sister from the horrors of Iris Hill.
And once Daria could walk, they used her little trick to slip her out into town with him. She would go, and nobody could see her.
The feeling of holding your best and only friend's hand in yours while nobody in the world but you knew they were there, it was intoxicating.
They explored every corner of Thrushmoor together, always careful to turn back at the wall on the east side, the line beyond which they were not supposed to pass. And then it happened in their 9th year. Picture the scene.
The blue-tiled floor of the Baron's throne room.
A steep, wet, riddle-poured alleyway. At midnight, a storm was breaking.
The heart of an amphitheater, so ancient it almost seemed to be natural.
Beneath the eaves of the whaling house.
Let's start at the whaling house. We basically know this story already.
Young Ray wrapped the chain of his necklace tight around his sister's neck.
And he strangled her. It took a disturbingly long time. She fought back. She fought back hard. But in the end, she fell.
Ray didn't know what he was doing, of course. The fun juice had kicked in by that point, and whatever it was that he saw, whatever it was that his father made him see, he was convinced it was trying to kill him. So he fought.
And something terrible happened.
The chain closed tight.
A loss. And when it was over, he ran. He barely understood what he had done, but he knew it was bad, and he believed it was all his fault, so he ran. He ran for the woods at the edge of town, and as he stumbled past that little wall on the east side, he ran into the stranger.
And nothing was ever the same again.
6 years earlier, in the heart of an ancient amphitheater, it all happened as Both Eyes' reign was falling apart. The jeers about the runt had grown to the point where Both Eyes took the tribe to the pit of the scourge. Father hauled son to the center, and amidst the shards of ancient black rock, he said that anyone could challenge him. In fact, everyone could.
It was Fargrid who stepped forward first.
He did so knowing that any of the other orcs would slaughter his brother without mercy. But if Fargrid could pull his blows just enough, there might be a tiny chance that Grook could play dead, possibly survive after the tribe left. It was such a tiny, thin, brutal ray of hope, but it was the only one Fargrid could see. So he stepped out to meet his brother on the field of battle.
Young Grook picked up a rock.
Fargrid stuck to his fists.
And just as Grook was winding up for his first swing,
out of the corner of his eye, Fargrid saw the arrival of a group of Knoll raiders cresting the ridgeline at the top of the amphitheater. And he also saw, at their head, the stranger. The sight of a fully unmasked denizen of Lang froze Fargrid for a split second. But Grook was facing the opposite way. He had no clue. And something terrible happened.
the rock swung.
A loss. The blow that should have only grazed Fargrid struck true and dropped him. The gnolls and the stranger swarmed over the top of the rise, decimated his tribe, while Grook stood helplessly at the center, in shock, mourning his fallen brother.
When they finally reached him, he swung out in fury, but he missed.
He fell forward. The howling started, and with it came the pain. Eventually, the stranger reached him.
And nothing was ever the same again.
3 years earlier, in Riddleport, life in Bergen-Belling's Home for Wayward Boys wasn't great. First of all, there were so many rules.
When you woke, when you ate, what you could eat, what you could do.
It was not the life Victor had known. It was not a life Victor thrived in. And, of course, there was the abuse. Kids were being neglected. Kids were being hurt. But not Victor. He didn't know why at first, but the other kids were happy to tell him, "It's because of your uncle, stupid." Uncle G had always just been Uncle G to Victor. But to everyone else, who recognized the surname at once, Uncle G was...
Gavroni Stoicha, the Serpent of the Lost Coast.
You see, Victor had told the staff that he was Victor Stoicha, not Victor Zolotov. It was a simple little lie. Not even really a lie, just something he did because he was thinking about family lines. There was still one Zolotov out there, hopefully, in Sebastionis, but there were no more Stoichas, so he thought he'd honor his mom and his Uncle G with just a little name change. No harm, no foul, right?
Except, of course, little Victor had no idea what a legendary figure his uncle was.
And nobody, and I mean nobody, actually believed the serpent was dead. Not at that time, not yet. Stoich's nephew being at Belling's place was some weird kind of test. At least that's what everyone seemed to believe. Who will dare hurt my nephew? And of course, nobody would.
Once Victor learned about this and he realized he had some leverage, he decided to use it to help the rest of the kids there. He went to the headmaster.
And the headmaster listened to the child's threats. And when Belling responded, he spoke to Victor of a plan. Yes, this place is bad, but it's not my fault. Yes, we can help all of the kids if you're willing to take action.
Victor, 9 years old, was of course willing to take action.
Belling drowned the kid in a sea of jargon about protection rackets, insurance schemes, shady legalities. Victor didn't understand the details, but he understood the plan.
Belling would make arrangements to get all the kids out. He'd leave them at the Temple of Iomade, where they'd have to take them in. Meanwhile, while everyone was gone, Victor would slip into the alley and toss a torch into Belling's window, which Belling would leave open and filled with oil.
Belling would be seen at his club that night, and no suspicion would fall on him. The school would go up in flames, Belling would claim his insurance money, the kids would be taken in by the priests, and Victor could take off and find his brother. But of course, on that stormy night, when little Victor stood in that alley and tossed the torch he'd jury-rigged from a broken table in the third-floor nursery and some old used cloth diapers, something happened.
Victor threw the torch.
And as it sailed upwards, out of the corner of his eye, he saw the faces above. The kids were all still in there, locked in their dorms on the second floor. And so, presumably, were the even younger kids on the third floor, but it was too late.
The torch flew.
A loss. Scratch that. Losses.
He backed down the alley, unable to take his eyes off what had happened. He was facing forward, but moving backward.
And just as he was reaching for the slick cloth rope draped over the nearby wall, his escape route, the stranger reached him.
And nothing was ever the same again.
And 17 years earlier, in Numeria, the Baron had all his wives and daughters in the throne room. They were sewing and stitching and knitting and, of course, obeying the Baron's every depraved whim. Until
Thessica refused.
What was the final straw that day? Dora will never know, but something snapped in Thessica Antea, and she said the word you were never to say to Baron Feshka Nellet.
She said no.
And all it took was one of the women saying no, for the rest to get that gleam of no in their eyes. Everyone in that blue-tiled room felt the shift. Something was happening. And if the Baron didn't act quickly, there would be no going back. So the Baron acted. He began casting spells on Thessica. With the first one, excruciating deformation, Dora watched as her mother's limbs twisted, her body contorted, and she screamed in unbearable agony.
And it only got worse after that.
She stood there helplessly, clutching her knitting as her mother was brutally tortured. She didn't know what to do. She felt so hopeless, so alone. Dora knew she had to act, but the will to hurt, to possibly have to kill, it was not in her. She couldn't do it. Her mother raised her, despite the circumstances, to be kind, to think, to trust, to forgive.
So she had to become someone else.
And so this beautiful, sensitive, loving, caring child, this child nearly exploding with psychic potential.
She pictured a metal box with a hinged cover, roughly the size of a lockbox, but bigger on the inside.
And she took every part of her psyche that was sensitive, that was thoughtful, that was caring, and she boxed it. She locked it away inside a prison in her mind. She stripped herself of everything that defined herself in order to release everything inside of her that was anathema to her, to make space in her soul for darkness to grow, to become. She unleashed her viciousness, her vindictiveness, that which acted on instinct instead of information, that which clung to slights and wrongs, that which sought to dominate, to punish,
to hate.
And once this once-in-a-generation psychic boxed her consciousness, it worked.
Dora needed someone who could do what she was incapable of doing, and so she turned herself into that person. She created Anathema. She became Anathema.
And then Anathema did what was necessary. As the Baron cast the spell that would end his mother's life, as he was momentarily distracted,
young Tima raised her knitting needle and stabbed him right in the eye.
A loss. Scratch that. 2 losses. The Baron died, but not before his spell completed. Thessica's head exploded, and her trunk was left slumped over. this shattered monument to what happens when you say no to the Baron, just as the Baron toppled forward and landed on the needle, face first, shoving it all the way through his head.
Anathema wandered away. Left, up, right, down, up, left. She ignored the cries and chaos, nearly blinded by her tears.
And of course, soon the stranger found her.
And nothing was ever the same again.
In the immediate aftermath, she knew what she'd done. She knew where she'd put Dora. But once Wherein had her, she found she needed to be Anathema simply to survive. Returning to that lockbox was not an immediate priority. And as time passed, it became less and less something she was even aware of or remembered.
Until finally, she simply lost it.
Because when Dora boxed herself, she boxed her own psychic talents with her. And Anathema, eventually Tima, retained none of them. She still had Dora's razor-sharp mind, of course, but that mind was as psychically sensitive as a block of wood. It could figure out how to blow things up or summon aberrations from beyond the veil, but it could no longer read a soul, or plumb its depths, or unlock the mysteries of those deep, secret places inside of others.
Or herself.
Dora needed Tima, so Dora created Tima. And then Dora sacrificed herself to Tima and became Tima. But Dora is Tima, and Tima is Dora. Two personas, but one body, one mind, one life, and in truth,
one person.
The years between that first murder, or murders, and the next, those years of change and transition, of adolescence, they were rough. When Wherein took Anathema into her custody, she had no plan, no direction. She still believed she could capture Gavroni and Mej, not knowing that that was never meant to be.
So she dumped Anathema off with her ally Razanil, for him to have his way with.
As Wherein continued the search for her murderers. By the time she found Roni, she was the stranger. She'd established her contacts in the Inner Sea region.
So she dumped him with biting lash and told him to make his life hell.
Which it was. The situation was similar with Grook.
Dumped with biting lash after she found him in the wastes.
Ray was born so much later when the situation in Thrushmore was already up and running, so there was less physical torment for him. By that time, Wherei's greatest pleasure was derived from the psychological torture and corruption. Wherein pushed Ray's buttons to the point that
the poor kid believed he found a savior in Zan Kuthan.
Just as she'd poisoned Rip Tusk's eternal soul by getting him to bind himself to Nergal before then dropping him in a situation where he'd fall into the worship of the King of the Yellow, she not only helped Ray stumble into a relationship with Zan Kuthan before attempting a similar corruption, but she even taught him to profane Shaylin, Zan Kuthan's own sister, by seeding in Ray an idea.
He wrote prayers to the Eternal Rose, and then he would destroy them in the act of using them as components for casting spells dedicated to the Prince of Pain.
Yeah, adolescence was rough. Mostly, again, because they had so few choices and so little power. But then something happened that was their choice. It was a choice they likely would never have made if their lives had not been shaped by so much trauma, but still, it was a choice that they made. And they made it alone.
Tima Antea freed a devil to slaughter her captor, all to access the forbidden knowledge she sought.
Roni Stoicha killed an innocent man, just to remain undetected.
Gruk Riptusk sacrificed 13 helpless captives, all to expand his power.
Braden Vaticus murdered a joyful thing in exchange for the strength of will he sought.
And a road they never would have otherwise stumbled down on their own became their path. Exactly as Wherein wanted. 4 souls corrupted in darkness. 4 souls choosing lives of ruin and waste. 4 souls that could be molded by Namira and her son to labor on behalf of the King in Yellow. Praise. Not that these 4 choices were an immediate flipping of a switch, but they marked what each would later identify as a turning point, a point of no return, which would haunt them before the end. We've been exploring the story thus far out of chronological order, but from this point forward, we will move linearly through time. 25 years ago in Rosenport, Timo was sold to Lowell's by Wherein as a research assistant to help him in his studies of Carcosa and Hastur.
The research was intoxicating to 23-year-old Tima. A whole new world was open to her. She realised that there were mysteries out there even more profound than those of this reality. There were visions and journeys and power to be had.
She was also, of course, on a lot of drugs. She needed to be changed. So as we know, Munn made the drugs and gave them to Lowell's. Lowell's gave them to Vaticus, and Vaticus administered them to Tima, and they worked for years and years. Tima's mind was opened, and she was made compliant.
But whether or not it was driven by the drugs, Tima became fascinated by Hastur. The story of a simple shepherd walking into the throne room of a palace, unleashing terror. It struck a chord.
She imagined herself as the pallid mask to Feshka Nellet's Queen Casilda.
And the thought of unleashing madness in a royal court gave her shivers of ecstasy.
This was also when Melisande entered the picture, and those two hated each other from the jump.
Tima had this nightly ritual where she would try to quiet her mind and focus. There was something she'd lost, something she'd forgotten. She would sit in front of a mirror and imagine another version of herself walking around it. But every time she almost got deep enough within herself, every time she almost found what she was looking for,
she'd be interrupted by a banging on the door. Melisande, walking by, just being awful. This happened over and over and over.
If there was ever a hope that Tima might recover the Dora within her, it died during those years.
And this brings us to the first Nexus. Braden was born to Tima. Melisande had given Lowell's this idea a few years earlier. Wouldn't it be hilarious if Vaticus was fucking Tima? I mean, she was so drugged up, what could she do about it? A piece of her on the inside would be screaming in rage, but what could she do? Nothing. The answer was nothing. So Braden was born, and it wasn't a surprise to anyone except Ray how much she hated him. That year, the year Braden was born, was the same year Victor burned down the orphanage, by the way, and when his time in Biting Lash's fortress, Blossoming Thorn, began.
And the same year he was branded on the back of his neck with her mark. These years were hell, unrelenting hell. Much of it he suppressed for the rest of his life.
2 years later was when Lowell's III died, and Namira supposedly too, a month later, and when Lowell's IV moved the whole entourage to Thrushmoor.
It was actually Tima who gave Lowell's the idea to keep his mother in the attic. It was an experiment of sorts. Namira had given her soul to Hastur. She had delved deep into the mysteries. Would the mysteries keep her alive? Without food? Without water?
They did, in a way.
A year later, Tima was weaned off the drugs. Her devotion to Hastur was complete. The narcotics were unnecessary. They only got in the way of her fully exploiting her higher brain functions.
This was around when Riptusk killed his brother, and Wherein took him.
A year later, Tima and Vaticus got married. Why not? By that point, Tima honestly thought it would be funny. Marry her rapist while a bunch of locals bled out in the court of the Unspeakable One far below Iris Hill? Hastur would approve. And that night is when Tima was seated with Shaman Dor by Munn.
Which was a thing she hadn't known she'd been waiting for all her life.
By this point, she'd been Tima for decades. She'd been steeped in the worship of Hastur for years. She had murdered, she'd summoned devils. None of this was a life she'd chosen.
But it was the life she had. And she was all in.
That's the thing about Shaman Dor. Once he's up in there, entangled in your brain folds, entwined in your consciousness, whispering to you, not just of unspeakable secrets, endless life, immortal power, but also of change, of transformation.
And the secret, undeniable truth that you are the worst version of yourself. That you are less than the shit scraped loose by the cloak of an elder god in a stinking sewer in a forgotten city that fell to ruin before it was even built.
But that even as lowly and wretched as you are, you can be a change agent in the universe and bring about cataclysmic transformation.
The appeal is real.
Or at least, it was real for Tima. And for Lowell's. Over the many years they worked, theorized, and plotted together, they came to be, in many ways, like twisted little siblings. And that brings us to the second Nexus, a year later, 17 years ago. Roni and Riptusk were brought together in Blossoming Thorn.
Riptusk was branded, and following 3 separate escape attempts, Riptusk was divested of 3 of his fingers.
These years, the next 2 years, during which, back in Thrushmoor, Daria was born, they were hell for those two. But a bond was forged between them that was almost unbreakable. Without the other, neither would have survived.
It was Roni who gave Riptusk the name of Grip. It was a secret name.
Something only the two of them shared. Something never spoken outside of their little circle.
When he had to be hard, he used the name Riptusk.
But when he thought of who he really was...
He was Grip, a survivor. Someone who could hold on, no matter the shit thrown at him.
No matter what chaos fell into their lives.
And that brings us to the final Nexus. Roni and Riptusk were sold to Lowell's, and everyone was under the same roof. This was 15 years ago.
Tima, of course, immediately ceded Roni and Riptusk.
And there was an incident.
Roni was slippery. He got out, and he started whispering the name.
Damage control was tough. Some had to be murdered. Some were taken into Iris Hill as new staff. But a few slipped notice, and one, just one, ended up in Briarstone Asylum, where he committed suicide quite gruesomely in the Northwest Tower room one afternoon. Just one of 6 patients sitting in their rocking chairs, staring out over the north lawn. As he slit his throat, he managed to get just half of the inmost blot's name out in a feeble, gurgling croak, not enough to infect the others. But it wasn't long after that Oliver Xandalis began drawing the lone standing stone on the island, which he had never laid eyes on. Consequence. And soon he was drawing others, the ones in the hills of Thrushmoor, and the ones in the wastes of Neruzavin. We're cruising right along now. We'll hit the next chunk of years pretty quickly, because what we really want to drive to is when the Dreamlands entered the lives of these 4 people. Mun made the drugs, Vaticus administered the drugs, Roni and Riptusk were made compliant.
They fell into their jobs with gusto.
They simply loved murdering people.
Soon they were fully Hasterton's agents and dutiful servants of Carcosa, because that's the thing about Haster. Show people just enough through a little crack in the door of reality, and all they thought they knew about the natural order and the way things are, show them just a hint of other truths out there, and they walk through that door on their own.
For some, it's the pure unbridled chaos and nihilism.
For others, it's about power. Control.
And these two who had never truly known power, who had never been in control, who saw existence itself as a kind of prison, the appeal was real.
During these years, Vic started dreaming every night of his teeth falling out. So he started pulling them out with pliers.
And Vaticus would fashion new teeth out of scrap metal and pound them into his skull.
All this without any anesthesia.
Roni and Riptusk were on the drugs for 5 years, but were weaned off them 10 years ago when Mellison proclaimed their conversions complete.
A year later, Roni was given permission to take a visit his homeland. He returned with a new rapier and a tattoo. And
just as Viktor Zolotov had become Viktor Stoicha, and Viktor Stoicha had become Roni Stoicha, during this period, Roni Stoicha became nameless.
During this period, Grip kept dreaming that he was traveling a desert to find something or lose something, but he didn't know what it was. He told Roni about these dreams, and Roni was pretty sure he knew what was going on.
Nergal.
Grip's soul now belonged to two gods, Nergal and Hastur. But he couldn't be fully Hastur's until he broke all ties with Nergal. This would take ruthless discipline. He would have to break the sigils, reconstruct his soul, and discipline his mind.
No drugs.
No dwelling on the past.
Live in the present.
Live for the king.
It maybe worked for a time.
Around this time, Ray left for university in Cheliax. He thought he was in control of his life's choices here.
But of course, the whole idea had been seeded by the Wherein. So, Vic was doing great, still pulling his own teeth out.
But replacing them with gold ones now. He could afford it.
Grip was doing great.
Hiding from the sun god, crushing skulls.
Ray was doing great.
Torturing people as a teenaged priest of an insane god of sadomasochism.
And Tima was doing great, just great.
Neck deep in dark tomes relating to legends of Carcosa, stroking the finger bones of the dead daughter she'd named after the part of herself she'd forgotten ever existed. And always cultivating.
By 5 years ago, the hedge wall went up around Iris Hill. Lowell's and Tima's studies were progressing. The world really needed to be kept out, because Lowell's was cooking on something. No one was totally clear on exactly what Lowell's was trying to puzzle out, but isn't that the way of closed little cults? No need to ask questions. Hastur and Jamandor have all the answers. Take the little rewards that make you think you're doing great and just keep reading, cultivating, and killing. The years passed.
Riptusk became the constable.
Lowell spent all the county's money on books.
Roni and Riptusk would kill the book dealers who wouldn't sell, or who Lowell's didn't feel like paying.
While they stuck their fingers in every pie of graft and extortion they could bake up in Thrushmore.
Lowell's started visiting Xandalus. He wasn't getting the exact access he wanted, so...
A change in leadership at the asylum needed to be arranged.
The Chain of Knights was obtained.
And Tima's research practically exploded.
Roni and Melisande started fucking.
Why not, right? Who cares? Oh, God, the bleakness. Tima was spiraling into Jamandor. Riptusk and Roni were murdering and tormenting so many people. And Ray was back by this point.
He'd returned with such a simple plan. Step 1, kill his mom. Maybe both his parents? TBD. Step 2, kill himself. But somehow...
that just didn't happen. He was promptly seated by his mother. Why'd she waited so long? And he just kind of fell into the routines of the group, and he was always so tired.
Nobody actually knew where it was he slept during those years.
Because the Iris Hill staff never once found his bunk bed in the guest house needing to be made. There are 1,000 stories from this era of their lives, but they all lead to the Oasis. And so it came to pass. On the 6th of Serenith, 4715, the party entered the Dreamlands for the first time. Roni, Riptusk, Ray, and Vaticus knew almost nothing about what they were heading into. They knew they were going somewhere, that there would be a trek involved. They knew they needed to keep Lowell's alive. They knew they were seeking someone called the Mad Poet, but that's about it. Lowell's and Tima kept from them all knowledge of the Dreamlands, what it was, that was even where they were going. They explained that they'd be going somewhere else and that their only way back would be a command word which only Lowell's could speak.
They didn't want anyone getting ideas, like, say, I'll just wake up and leave them to fend for themselves.
So they didn't understand that they were in a dream. But they sure found out. We already know what happened then. It didn't go well. They died. And when they woke almost a month later.
This wasn't how the ritual was supposed to work.
Obviously, the rules were not rules, or the rules were flexible, or the rules simply didn't apply at the Mad Poet's Oasis.
There was so much more to learn.
The next few years were a blur, and they all lead up to the Dream Quests. So when they did wake up a month later, they were all mad. None of them truly understood how lucky they were that Melisande didn't kill them when they were helpless. But she'd heard Ariadne's voice a number of years earlier, and she was told not to stand in Lowell's way, so she didn't kill them, but she didn't particularly help them recover. They were all insane for a while. But when they did recover, as we know from Lowell's journal, they learned about the gifts, and the hunt for gifts began. Everyone was filled in on the basics of dream travel, to a point, just what they needed to know. Lowell's, in his paranoia, made sure that the others were drugged every time they went. He wasn't comfortable with the idea of his being asleep while the rest might wake up first. So he wrote to Mun. Mun sent the drugs that would keep their minds active and alert, but their bodies unconscious long enough that no matter what happened, they would always wake last. Lowell's went to the Dreamlands night after night, sometimes with his crew, sometimes with hired mercenaries, sometimes with a mix. They did it in the guest rooms upstairs at Iris Hill. He and Tima had the beds. Some of the others would get pallets to collapse on. Braden and any mercenaries got the floor. Then every morning, when it was required,
Roni and Riptusk would murder the mercenaries.
And dump them in a mass grave.
this got old after a while. They started to feel a little like flunkies rather than key players in service to their king. What were they even doing? What was the end game here? Need to know. That's what the end game was. Over and over they went. In the dream, Lowell's learned about the Mad Poet and passed the information on to Tima. Tima researched gifts. In the waking world, Roni and Riptusk secured books about ritual magic and brought them to Tima. Tima learned that you could use passwords to bring you to a specific spot in the Dreamlands, but she had to create them, a process that took time.
Months, in fact, for the first one she made.
And just imagine a couple of few years of this. Imagine the slow, inevitable breaking down that started to happen. I'm sure after all we've gone through in Act 3 here, I'm sure you can picture it. But let's do the quests, the beginning of the end for this twisted little cabal. They went after the signet ring first, on the night of the 3rd of Calistrol, 4718, so that's last February. This one shouldn't have had much of an impact on the group since it was, in retrospect, the easiest of the quests, but it really did a number on them. They arrived in Brellin's ballroom and arranged a meeting with the Viscount, which Lowell's took alone, while the others waited for hours and hours.
Tima had been feeling like a true partner to Lowell's, but being left out of this conversation gave her pause.
Vaticus looked out the windows and saw the city of Celophaeus laid out before him, and it broke him. He understood, for the first time, truly, that the Dreamlands was a whole universe with actual civilizations and history and people, and the sorry state of his life hit him hard. He realized for the first time that there might actually be somewhere to escape to, and it shook him.
Riptusk saw that huge sun hanging immobile in the sky, and idly wondered how they'd managed to chain their gall like that.
It was an idle thought, a framing from his early childhood.
But it brought his mind onto the shining scourge in a way he hadn't thought of him in years. And standing there at the window, as the sunlight hit his arms, he started to itch.
Ray, suddenly having many hours of quiet time for the first time in a long time, he looked around and wondered what the hell he was doing, how he'd gotten there, and why he was just sitting in some room with his mother, not killing her. How had he gotten here?
Roni, also having his first long stretch of time in the dream doing nothing but sitting around, was struck by the lack of Jamandor in his head. He'd gotten used to the inmost plot whispering away in there, but being reminded of what it was like to have his own space inside his head, it kicked something loose in him.
They secured the ring and woke.
In the waking world, it took a few weeks for Tima to finish the passphrase for direct travel to the Enchanted Wood.
As she toiled away, Vaticus was distracted. The others had never seen him like this. He just wandered around, or even weirder, he just sat there, not doing anything. It couldn't have been less like him.
But Roni noticed, and he leapt on the opportunity. Number one, Roni wondered if the drugs Lowell's gave him were what was keeping Jamandor out of the dream. He resolved to learn more about alchemy, so he snuck into Vaticus' lab, made copies of his formulas, determined to steal as much knowledge as he could. Number 2. With Vaticus so distracted, Roni finally found his window to study the alchemical torch, to piece out its inner workings. He began to work on a small prototype of his own.
Meanwhile, Riptusk couldn't shake the itch, and he couldn't tell whether or not it was just in his mind. He started dabbling in Jane's drugs. Just a little at first. Just a taste.
And Ray found himself feeling unusually angry and fuzzy-headed. He couldn't get his brain working right, so he started beating the shit out of people in the stain.
They went after the Pardtail next, roughly 3 weeks later, on the 21st of Calistral, still February. Lowles was hopped up and excited, talking up a storm, Mouthman.
Tima stuck close to him, refusing to be left out of anything. And because of the similar mannerisms and Jamindor fungal growth,
The Zoogs dubbed her evil sister.
Ray was bitter and pissed, arguing with everyone.
Angry kitten.
Roni just wanted to wrap this one up and get back to his real-world projects.
Dead eyes.
Riptusk was immediately freaked out about how bad his arm was itching under the light of the Dreamland sun, and so he abandoned his tattoo needle. He left that piece of himself behind, hoping that clearing his person of anything attached to the shining scourge would help.
And Vaticus was just quiet. When they arrived, Tima thought they could negotiate with the Zoogs. Lowles agreed with that plan, but Ray ran out of patience and basically strong-armed them into taking them to the Pards. The fight was brutal. Within moments, Vaticus, Lowles, and Tima woke themselves up just to ensure their survival. Over a dozen Zoogs died. The only one worth his salt in the fight was the one they called Mortimer. Eventually, they finished the fight,
with Riptusk claiming the killing blow on both Pards.
great warrior, but not before Roni used Mortimer as a living shield to save himself in a critical moment.
And something about that tiny creature dying in his hands freaked Roni out. Something instinctive kicked in, and he was shaken in a way he hadn't been in a long time.
They grabbed the tail and woke. In the waking world, it was go, go, go.
Tima wasn't sure she had her next passphrase sufficiently honed.
But Riptusk was hopped up. Fighting, even in a dream, was better than thinking, so he egged Lowles on.
They went after the skull of ghoul royalty the very next night. They arrived outside of Iguskai's.
Which, Tima pointed out, wouldn't have happened if she'd been given more time to work on her passphrase.
On this cliff overlooking the Lenghoul Necropolis Metropolis. There was a civil war brewing between two halves of the mighty civilization, and a group of insurgent arcanists were summoning outsiders to help them in their battle. As the party materialized there amongst the Lenghouls, they all got glimpses into alternate lives, and the experience was intense.
Ray couldn't let go of his vision of living as a village healer in a small town, working in partnership with his very much living sister.
Tima was haunted by a glimpse of herself as a kindly educator with a different name.
And Roni was haunted too, by a similar vision of himself as Dr. Professor Vic.
He tried to brush the visions aside.
But something burrowed in.
And Riptusk saw himself as a mentor to a bunch of kids, and had no idea how to process that.
Finding himself trapped in a summoning circle, Lowles called an abort, and everyone woke themselves up.
Except for Roni.
Roni stayed. He talked to the ghouls and learned about their conflict and convinced the ghouls to let him help them.
He snuck into the city by himself. He found the Queen's crypt and stole the ruby-encrusted skull.
But he didn't leave right away. He stayed.
He was curious. So he found a small mausoleum in an out-of-the-way cave called the Plaza of Bones and hid himself for a bit. He lived 3 nights without Jamindor, just to have the experience for himself.
And before he woke, he left a coin behind, idly curious about what sort of, if any, impact they could actually make on these places. What, if anything, they could leave behind that might last.
It was an experiment. His intention was to come back and get the coin.
But then Sarnath happened. In the waking world, Roni told Lowles only what he needed to know. He got the skull. He didn't mention his little vacation experiment. And since they were on a roll, they went again, right away, even though...
Once again, Tima begged for more time. She knew she could land the party somewhere in Sarnath, but she didn't know yet whether or not she could actually get them exactly where the idol could be found. But nobody was listening to Tima.
Especially Lols. They went after the greenstone idol of the water lizard the very next night. We're still in February here. They arrived in the palace of King John of the Bone Crown on the 10th anniversary of the raising of Ib. The mood of the palace was muted, first because of the storm brewing out over the lake. Second, the greenstone idol stolen by Lord Dunsany and his conquering army when they destroyed the city of Ib, the idol had vanished the previous night. It had been held in the high temple of Tamash the Illusion, but the high priest had been found dead that very morning, and before his demise, he'd scrawled a single word onto the empty altar.
Doom.
And that started the shit show that this quest turned into. The idol wasn't in Sarnath anymore, so the next logical place to check would be Ib, but they hadn't really thought of this quest in trekking terms, so they wondered if they'd be better off waking up, having Tima see if she could learn more, and then popping back in. They hadn't yet processed what happens when you leave the Dreamlands and return to the same location. So they woke, and in the waking world...
Tima dove into more research. After many weeks, she couldn't find any writings on what happened to the idol and said they should just return and think of this quest as a longer-term exploratory hunt.
Meanwhile...
Ray declined.
Riptusk declined. He was doing more than simply tasting Jane's drugs now.
And Vaticus retreated.
With Tima distracted in other research, Roni snuck access to materials she wasn't using, and he began to teach himself how to perform the Dreamlands excursion ritual. He wanted more control over how and when he went, just in case. And he wanted to return to Iguskai's to find his coin.
They returned to the Dreamlands on the night of the 8th of Gozrin. This is now April. They arrived in the reign of King Edward the Learned on the 37th anniversary of the raising of Ib. The city was celebrating. The anniversary of the slaughter had become a local holiday. They were partying, and the waters of the lake were rising. The group trekked around the lake over the course of 4 days and found the ruins of Ib. They walked the empty streets until they found a small stone altar on the lakeshore upon which sat a glowing green idol. When they approached, Ib shades rose and killed the whole party before they could wake. All except for Lols, that chicken shit, who got himself out fast enough. In the waking world, everyone but Lols woke in a catatonic state. Lols debated just killing them and moving on with mercenaries, but he feared no. He knew that he needed the party's collective experience, and of course he wasn't fully confident in his ability to perform the ritual without Tima. It took a month due to the general lack of healing and counseling he had access to, but eventually he got the whole group back on their feet again, and they went back on the 3rd of Desnas. This was May now. They arrived during the reign of King Howard the Mad on the 75th anniversary of the raising of Ib. Nobody died this time, but they had to prematurely wake themselves, and then this just went on and on and on. They'd go, it would be later. The waters of the lake were higher, the storm was closer. They'd trek around the lake, they'd enter Ib, and the Ib shades would be too numerous to overcome.
Over.
And over.
And over.
And over.
They went nearly every night. Sometimes they'd pause for a bit, but not long enough to truly recover.
Tima was a machine, but after a while even her will began to falter.
Ray grew both duller and angrier.
During this stretch of months, Ray had his stints in jail.
Grip's drug use grew worse and worse.
Roni developed extreme paranoia, and the relationship between him and Riptusk took a steep nosedive.
Their conflict came to a head over Nixon, and the two were never seen speaking to each other after it. When the party went to Sarnath on the night of the 26th of Serenith, June now, they finally cleared the Ib shades, but as Lols stepped forward to grab the idol, Bo Krug rose from the lake, and the sight drove them mad. They all woke blind. Their eyes, according to Melisande, seemed to be functional, but none of them were receiving visual input. It took time to heal and cure this psychosomatic damage.
On and on this went.
Over and over.
Sometimes they'd make through the red shirts.
And sometimes they wouldn't.
Sometimes they'd avoid seeing Bo Krug,
but sometimes they wouldn't.
Trauma, madness, and mind-numbing repetition.
At some point along the way, Ray noticed that he'd manifested a relic from his past in the hand of his dream avatar, his old scalpel, the one he'd used to mutilate his body after he'd killed his sister.
And then he remembered that he had killed his sister.
Something he pushed so deep, and his disgust at himself and his cowardice and his ruin of a life clobbered him, and he left that piece of himself behind. There, in that dream, after months of madness, he didn't want to be himself anymore. He didn't want to know himself. He didn't understand himself. He couldn't be himself.
In the end, they finally got the idol. It was Ray who touched it. And the moment he did, he felt a certainty fall upon him that he was doomed.
Back in the waking world, Ray cast Commune and got confirmation that he was indeed doomed. But it seemed it wasn't Bokrug that would get him. Someone else was coming for him. Someone close to him. And the others would simply watch as he died.
So Ray talked to Melisande on the 3rd of Lamashan, 21 days before this campaign began, and he asked her to have Reese kill the others. Roni bought his house on the 5th of Lamashan, 19 days before the campaign began.
He needed a space of his own. Nobody could be trusted, not anymore.
Vaticus, by now basically wanting to die, told Tima about what he and Ray did to Daria on the 6th of Lamashan, 18 days before the campaign began.
Tima took to Melisande that very same night.
It was all falling apart. But there were still 3 more gifts to get. After the shit show of Sarnath, Roni didn't want to enter a new location without as much information as possible. So, having learned the ritual, he grabbed a couple of the mercenaries Lowell's kept around and used them as secondary casters, and he went to scope out the Heartstone quest on the 10th of Lamashan.
And Roni loved it in Dilathleen. A whole world of vice. An opportunity to do anything he wanted, free from Jamandor and Lowell's crew.
So he stayed.
He did crimes, he made choices, he hooked up with one of the women from the drug den, and he stayed with her. He fathered a child with her. He helped raise that child for years. His daughter, Katerina, named after Roni's long-dead, nearly forgotten mother.
Then one morning, Katerina asked her dad what his tattoo meant. Roni had almost unconsciously avoided mirrors for the previous 19 years, and he'd forgotten what he looked like. He had forgotten that he was dreaming. The utter pointlessness of his life in Dilathleen, which would end when he woke, and the utter pointlessness of his life in Thrushmoor crashed home.
He found a mirror and stared at those tattoos, in particular the first one.
And something broke within him.
He cut that first triangle, that piece of himself, off his face. Pressed it into his daughter's hand and told her that the next time she saw him, if she did, to give it back to him, spit in his face.
The next day in the real world, but 19 years later in his timeline, Roni finally woke. And all that time in the Dreamlands, it broke his brain. He couldn't fully parse reality. He couldn't tell any longer what was dream and what was real.
But his past love for Grip surfaced somewhere in the haze and confusion. He wrote the constable a letter, left it at a known drop spot, and then before he knew it...
That night, on the 11th of Lamashan, the whole party went to Dilathleen. It was 6 weeks later there, and they orchestrated their attack on Quaviandra and left with the Heartstone. In the waking world, Lowell's decided to press on the very next night, but 2 of them didn't show up.
Riptusk was high. He didn't give a single solitary shit about anything anymore.
He was broken. Meanwhile, Ray had long thought of himself as someone who controlled the narrative of his life. What he'd done had haunted him for so long. He carved her name all over his body in the years following that terrible morning. But he went and took control. He put the past behind him.
He was well. He was well. He was well.
But then on the afternoon of the 12th of Lamashan, Ray woke up in the whaling house, curled in Daria's dead arms. And for no reason other than simple cruelty, the monster that he had made her decided not to steal his memories that day. For once and she whispered the truth to him.
That every single day since his return from Cheliax, he had slept in the arms of the sister he'd murdered, and she whispered torments into his ear.
Before the dream voyages, he'd stayed there by night. After the rituals started, he'd slink there in the early hours of the morning and rest with her until it was time for her to start hunting.
And Ray saw the truth of himself and his life, and understood that he'd never be free of the pain of what he'd done.
And something broke within him. They went after the captain's tricorn on the night of the 12th of Lamashon, 12 days before the start of the campaign. The bleakness hanging over the crew was bad at this point. Lowles could sense it, and he decided to rely solely on Tima. They did the ritual, but only she descended the stairs. And when she was done with Vedrak and had his hat, she looked around at who she was, what she'd been reduced to.
She found herself looking at the vial of silver dust she always kept hidden on her person. The vial had been a talisman of sorts all her life. She'd always thought of it as a reminder of her own resourcefulness.
But now it screamed to her the truth, that she was trapped as surely as the Selakotl devil had been. And something broke in her.
So she dropped it. She left that piece of herself behind.
In the waking world the next morning, Tima used a contact other plane spell. The pallid mask, Hastur's emissary, responded, and from him she learned of the mad poet's requirement of a sacrifice.
And she learned the nature of Lowell's intended sacrifice. All of them. They were the price Lowell was willing to pay to find Neruzavin.
It was now the 13th of Lamashon, 11 days before the start of the campaign. They went to Arventon that night. The whole crew was just done. When they arrived, there was bitter disagreement about how to put together this expedition to the Black Lake. The fighting got so heated that Lowell just pulled the plug and decided 6 gifts were enough, so everyone poofed out. Everyone
Except Tima.
She stayed. She found a scholar at Humbrecht University with access to the secret vaults and the darkest depositories of knowledge.
She killed him and took his identity.
And then she dove into the dark lore, locked away below Humbrecht, and she researched the city's origin for decades. She, of course, went slowly but surely insane as the years passed. Her lucid dream body began having lucid dreams inside the dreamlands of being an amorphous being with no physical form. She became a dream inside the dream of a dream.
Then she dreamed that she was somebody else's madness. That she was nothing more than somebody else's emotion. So warped and twisted that it couldn't do what it actually wanted to do. Which was to just let go.
So when she finally found the information Arventon had kept hidden for so long,
on the morning of her 85th birthday, she walked out into the streets and spoke the secret name of the city.
She destroyed everything and nearly everyone there. And then, as Arventon shattered, she was shunted back into her body, and she finally woke up after 37 years.
After leaving Arventon, Riptusk dreamt of standing on the battlements of Fort Halecourse, his arms thrown wide. As the sun burned him alive, he called out to Hastur and dared him to stand up to Nergal. He no longer cared which one of them claimed him. He just wanted it all to be over.
After leaving Arventon, Roni dreamt of peeking in on Katarina still a child, sleeping, warm, safe. And the fact that the greatest happiness he'd known in his life was an absolute, utter lie made him want to cut his own throat. So in the dream, he did.
And Ray simply dreamt of pulling eternally on a chain that was looped around his own throat.
So when Tima came to them, on the morning of the 14th day of Lamashon, the day they would return to the Mad Poet's oasis, they listened to her.
They listened when she spoke of freedom.
They listened when she spoke of an end to the struggle.
They listened when she spoke of an end to not just existence, but to memory and the self.
An escape not only from the bleak pointlessness of life,
but from all the horrors awaiting them after death.
And rather than killing Lowles, They chose to march to their own oblivion with full knowledge of what was about to happen. Lowell's had thought he'd outsmarted them, but in the end, they outsmarted him and welcomed with open arms the sacrifice he intended to make of them. He would steal nothing from them. They would finally be free of the lives Wherein had cursed them with. And on the night of the 14th of Lamashon, 10 days before the start of this campaign, they entered the Dreamlands and traveled to the Mad Poet's oasis. We know what happened there. Lowell's drowned them all in the pool. But when the moment came, the moment they felt everything they were,
All they knew.
All they'd done.
All they'd learned.
All they'd lost.
from the depths of their souls, clinging to the faint belief that they didn't deserve this, that this wasn't their fault, hoping against hope for another chance, a little piece of themselves cried out. As the waters filled her lungs, in her moment of last-second panic, Tima's soul cried out to...
Remember!
And Tima did remember.
She remembered the little girl named Dora who died that morning all those decades ago. She remembered who she was and who she could be.
And this psychic's mind, caught in the tide between worlds, entangled with the mind of a great old one, fueled by reserves of mental power beyond the grasp of most mortals.
She remembered.
And as that powerful mind slipped into oblivion, she boxed the monster she'd become, and she sank into those waters as Dora, hoping against hope that she could somehow defy this cruel fate. Meanwhile, Roni panicked in his own way as the water filled his lungs. He knew his entire personhood was about to be stripped of him.
But he was slippery. For so many years, he subsumed himself in so many identities that even those who knew him well didn't recognize him half the times they saw him.
His soul cried out to...
Hide yourself.
And this mind, self-taught from childhood to avoid detection and hold on to his secrets, this mind entangled with the great old one,
He hid himself.
he sank fully into the identity he'd studied the most.
Maybe the Wadith will find only Vaticus within me and take that away.
He thought, hoping to cheat what was to come. Meanwhile, Braden trembled in fear as the water filled his lungs. He'd inflicted so much terror on so many people during his brief life, but despite all the pain he'd suffered, he'd never truly allowed fear to enter his heart. Until this moment.
He knew that calling out to Zan-Kuthon would not help him. The Prince of Pain would simply find another useful tool with which to shape the flesh of the world in his image.
There would be no miracle for Father Ray. Yet still he prayed.
He thought of his lost sister, of her tenderness and mercy, and he prayed for his life, wishing he could live and be someone else, if only to honor her memory.
And another sister heard his cries. The goddess Shaylin heard this profound wish for atonement, and she answered it. She gave his soul the strength of will to...
Survive this.
She wrapped her care around his heart and drove her brother out. Zan-Kuthon, however, did not leave easily, and he cursed his former champion as he left. He may have life, but it will be a short one spent dying. And this mind, entangled with the great old one, only just starting to realize he had so much help he could give, with Shaylin in mind,
he prayed to survive.
Meanwhile, Riptusk raged in blind fury as the water filled his lungs. He'd been born weak, and after all he'd overcome, he was going to die, weak and helpless yet again.
Fuck this shite. He wasn't ready, as it turned out. And he wasn't going to go down like this. Not like this, not on his knees.
His soul cried out to...
Destroy them.
And this mind, entangled with a great old one, fueled by reserves of rage and anger beyond the grasp of most mortals,
He clung to the urge to be given a chance to destroy them.
and so they all slipped into oblivion. Those words burned into their subconscious minds. Then, as we know, the Mad Poet opened the Necronomicon before Lowell's eyes, and based on an unconscious conception he'd formed over years of conversations with Tima, Conversations about the soul, about compartmentalization, conversations where Tima thought she was talking about theories when, in truth, she was talking about her own experience. Every part of Lowell's that couldn't bear to see what he saw, to read what he read, to contemplate using what he planned to use. The pieces of him capable of love, of hope, of allyship, companionship, sympathy, and sorrow, those parts of him broke off to give his weak, shitty little mind the strength it needed to witness those dread pages, to witness them as nothing but a vessel untroubled by such concerns, which is exactly what he is now in the waking world, a vessel devoid of hope, love, allyship, companionship, sympathy, or sorrow. On his way to take the Necronomicon to Neruzavin, to take Jamandor into his flesh, and sacrifice the entire planet to Carcosa. Which brings us... Polly. Dabwick is the first to wake. It's, hey buddy, it's pretty disorienting. Your body feels really achy, stiff, and weak. And it's dark, it's pitch black. Or maybe you can't quite open your eyes, or maybe there's something attached to your face. It's hard to tell, but you hear a little stirring, a little rustling in the darkness, and then something warm on your hand. It's a hand. It's a warm hand, a large hand, a human. Okay, it's a human hand, probably. Dabwick? It sounds like Chester's voice.
Where am I?
Oh, come quick, they're waking up! And you hear some movement from a bit of ways away, but what you don't hear is the gentle splash of waves against the boat. You don't feel any rocking either. All right, Dabwick, now listen to me. I've got a cloth tied round your head so you don't hurt yourself when you open your eyes. Right, I'm gonna undo it, but Dabwick, go slowly, go very, very slowly. No sudden movements. All right, easy, very, very gentle. And someone's joined Chester. You can tell, and you can feel now Chester's hands on your head as he removes whatever cloth he's had covering your eyes, and then you feel kind of a coolness on your face, and you can tell now that you can open your eyes.
Chester, where am I? How long have I been asleep?
Dabwick, open your eyes.
Dabwick looks around.
So first, the light is just blinding. After a little bit, you adjust, and you can. Okay, all right. You can tell you're in a bed. You're in your bed, in your little flat, in Greyguard's shadow, in Casimir. Chester's sitting on a chair right next to your little bed, and standing beside him is J-Dove.
Oh.
Welcome back, Dabwick. I can't tell you what a relief it is to see you waking.
Dabwick raises up their hand. Stop.
It's so hard to move. Your arm is barely responding to the request to move, and this jerk of a hand raise probably turns into like a minute-long exercise as your hand shakes up into the air.
Where are my friends?
Husband and wife look at each other, and you can tell there's like some silent negotiating going on about who's gonna have to answer that question. Chester wins, so J-Dove says, So, Barnabas he's out in the other room. He's in Skywind's little setup there. He was the first to wake, but there's nothing left inside of him. His body speaks occasionally, but just little words, little snatches of a song. Maybe we've been doing the best we can with him. Stasi found in his hand a letter. And she pulls out this letter, and seeing how hard it is for you to still move your body as you're adjusting, she opens it up and holds it before you. And the letter says,
My friends, that is what we are, yes? I think so. We are intertwined in any event. This thing that intertwines us is an abomination beyond our ability to comprehend. And yet, it is the thing that has defined the last two groups that have felt like pack to me. Please forgive me for intruding on you in the dreamlands, but this was an instance where it is better to ask forgiveness and permission. The truth of the matter is, I cannot live with this thing in my head any longer. I cannot simply wait until the inevitable happens, until the fungus invades me and envelops my brain. I have watched it happen to those I loved before. I cannot allow it to happen to me. And I cannot watch it happen to you all. I do not know what I will find when I catch up with you. I do not know what will happen or what I will do. But based on what I have learned from you of what happened to you last time, I think the mad poet can take this affliction from me. And I believe, like with you, this will also take all of my memories, all of my past, all knowledge of who I am and have been. And I think it is a fair trade. I have no one to return to. I have no pack to rejoin. No one to look for. No one to avenge anymore. And even if I did, my mind, the vessel of my being, of everything I am and can do and can create, is corrupt and will eventually consume me with madness. I don't hear music anymore. Better to empty the vessel and start again. In this way, perhaps I can contribute to your cause after all. Grip, it seems we never really talked. The corrupt constable was the soul of a sailor. You look at home on the water. I know you fear you are little more than a killer, but you have shielded your friends from harm and death and horror so many times. You endured pain, so they did not have to. Does this not remind you of someone? Dabwick, I have never seen more distance between one's physical stature and the shadow of influence one casts on the world. I would fear your power if I doubted your heart. We are not of the other's past, you and I. And their past is a furnace that drives them relentlessly, but it may consume them. They will need you, and maybe you are coming to need them as well. Vic of the many names and voices, Gull, Roni, Vic, I have watched all three of you. You're hard to read, but you know this. You have such compassion in you, I can sense it. You are a killer, I can sense it. We are all of us multitudes, no? You and Grip have pasts you are both trying to run from and reckon with, I think. I see a spark in his eye when he is in the rigging. what spark will carry you when all this is done. And Dora. There's not the word in any language I know for the bond we share. More than friends, more than family. We met with both of us in the throes of madness, having seen something we should not. And somehow we brought each other back. We were each other's raft in the floodwaters of insanity. If you all had not found me next to that crevasse and that poor soul, I think I would have died there as a fox, never remembering who I am. I am sorry I am not strong enough to continue as you. And I'm sorry I woke up next to you so very naked and unexpectedly. Also, I have never forgotten the time Tima callously dropped me in that courtyard. You can tell her to fuck off from me. It is almost time for the last time. Sweet dreams, mes amis.
As you finish reading, Debwick, J-Dub takes your hand. Vic and Dora and Grip are out there too. They're still sleeping, but maybe this is a sign. They'll start coming to, Debwick. You've been asleep for over 2 months. And the others, they're all gone. And that's the end of chapter 150.
All gone?
Finally.
What?
Our Act 3 epilogue. Robert, Katie, and Johnny. Your characters hover in the terrible abyss that lies between sleeping and waking. Between now and then, the void between lives, the void outside of time. All is darkness, and the darkness is eternal without beginning or end until, in the void, there is the sound of a bell. You know it now. 2 of you know it very well. You heard it twice a day in, day out for years. It's the bell at the Shrine of Thafar, tolling out over Okano, over the Skin Dock, over the Flesh Fairs, over the shipwreck and the circus, tolling dawn or dusk, the time of change and transition to the city's myriad residents, the governor, the princess, the master of auctions, the gnolls and humans and rat folk. Even the corpse orgy must surely hear it down in the sweatways. You know this bell well, and you even know now exactly where it's being heard from. It is being heard from inside of Blossoming Thorn, Biting Lash's stronghold. And then there's a series of whirs and clicks and a buzzing and another sound. It makes no sense to you. And then a voice. Flat, genderless, inhuman.
Locating.
It's not language per se, it's a word or an idea in your head.
Locating.
The bell tolls again. Then, an image explodes into your mind from across the impossible void. You see Okano from above, a yellow city baking in the sun, dry as a bone despite the Obari Ocean surrounding it on one side, and a towering ring of mist-covered mountains enclosing it on the other. Then, now you're in the city, at street level. You hear a gluttonous cacophony of growls and barks like hyenas squabbling over a carcass. You hear screams, human screams, screams of pain and anguish. You see flags of chained skulls, burning whips, inverted ships. You see banners in a riot of different languages, Kelish, Mwangi, Osiriani, and a truly weird concoction that baffles Dora, for it uses the abyssal script, but not its words. Vic and Grip recognize it at once, though they cannot read it. It's the written form of the Gnoll tongue. Now you're viewing a building, 3-story, 100 feet tall, perfectly circular fortress of grim granite, its blossoming thorn. Then, close up, you see the face of an old woman. Human, brown, wind-scoured, leathery skin, eyes cloudy with glaucoma, long, thin, wispy gray hair. It's the prisoner. She looks up from the floor, stares right into your soul with her cloudy gray eyes, and without opening her mouth, she speaks. A direct transmission of her thought into the inside of your mind.
There you are. At last.
A single tear wets her left cheek.
Now, wake up. Save me.
And at long last you do wake. In Stabwick's living room, in Casimir, on the 23rd day of Farast, 4719, day 151 of the campaign. And that's the end of Act 3.
What the fuck?
Before we next meet, you will all level up, of course.
10th level.
But there is much to discuss about Vic, Grip, and Dora between acts. You've all just become whole, and that means you have some decisions you need to make between sessions here. What impact this knowledge and these experiences may have on you, on your personality, and your build as well. You can use this moment to do a little bit of stealing of feats or skill ranks from your former life in exchange for giving them up from this one, of course. If you wish, if it seems appropriate, I will, of course, share those sheets with you. You have seen the 5th level versions of your alternate selves, but not your 9th level versions. I'll give those to you in the break here. And Katie, you'll have to decide what this all means for Dora. Does she... don't answer now, but does she keep Tima, half of herself, as a separate, still boxed entity and continue to move forward as she has in the past? Does she do something else, fold her back inside of herself, swap out for... She could potentially swap out for an entirely new psychic discipline for the second half of the AP if you wanted to, more in line with what she is now. There's a lot to discuss.
Whoa.
And also, a fun little detail, this is one of my favorite little things that this AP sprinkles in. I'm sorry, Paul, but the campaign traits of anyone who survives to this point, who had woken up in Briarstone, they all get new abilities added on to them at this point. So we'll discuss that. I will save
really
that
cool.
as a surprise for when we do the leveling conversation next time.
Outstanding.
All right.
Love it.
Oh, that's cool.
Thanks, y'all, for Book 3. We'll see you soon. Dark Nexus is produced by Plug and Hum Productions. This podcast uses trademarks and/or copyrights owned by Paizo Incorporated, used under Paizo's fan content policy. This podcast is not published, endorsed, or specifically approved by Paizo. For more information about Paizo Inc. and Paizo products, please visit paizo.com. That's Paizo.com. Dark Nexus uses music and soundscapes by Syrinscape. Check them out at Syrinscape.com. That's Syrinscape.com. Opening and closing themes, along with additional music composed by Rob Kauzlaric. Artwork for Dark Nexus is by Matt Wahlquist. And thanks to DMCP, Richard and Ari, Paul and Shannon, Scotty, Jason, Jess, Joe, Chelsea, Matt, Dave, Derek, Darren, Michaela, J.H., the Biscuit Buddies, and everyone we've gamed with over the years for all the memories and inspiration.
Yay!
I've been waiting for this my whole
And we
life.
level.
Double level.
You know what I can do?
I'll
just do
I'll
it.
just do this.
I'll just do it.
Just do
Do it, do it, do it.
Just for shits and giggles.
So great, do it.
I woke up this morning and I was like, I'm going
I
to
was
kill
like,
everybody
I
in the
wanna
city.
make this whole place into
Have
my
you all
personal
ever
ceramic
just
doll
been done
collection.
to?
I'm going to say the secret name of Arvington.
Because I know it.